Welcome to the second episode of Developer Secrets for Racing Lagoon. Today we're going to look at some of the unused and unobtainable parts that are in the game's code. Racing Lagoon was very ambitious, especially for a PS1 game, so there are some things that just couldn't make it into the game and had to be cut for one reason or another. I should mention that this video will contain spoilers for parts and concepts for later in the game, so if you haven't made it there yet, I would consider maybe watching this video at a later date, after you've played more of it. One thing to note about this game is that there are a lot of parts, somewhere on the order of 800 when you include all the unused parts. The developers were really in tune with tuner culture at the time, and they really wanted to make something that really encapsulated everything that you could do with cars at the time. I've gathered these parts from within the game's files. Now, one thing you should note is, I don't always have everything for a certain part. It might have an icon missing, it might have a title missing, or it might have a description missing. The reason for this is all three of these things are stored in different locations within the game. Unfortunately, I can't show you how these parts would work in-game, as they're very buggy and will probably crash the game if you try to use them, outside of some of the engines. Normally all these descriptions would be in Japanese, but I've translated them to English for you to read. Here we have our first part, the intercoolers. According to the description, they would have improved the power of your turbos. They come in a few different sizes, as you'll see here. Really not sure what this racing oil pan would have been for. And now we have a set of oil coolers and radiators. What's interesting about these parts, as you can still see in the game, in the HUD when you're racing, the image file, that they were planning on having you monitor your oil temperature and your water temperature, and there were things that could overheat in your car. That has been removed in the final game, of course. Now we have a rev limit controller. It's not exactly clear how this would affect your car, but as you'll see later, a lot of adjustable parts like this were cut from the game. Nitrous oxide. Yep, it would have been pretty awesome. Too bad it was cut. These are blow-off valves, and there are 5 of them in the game. Here we see the developer's ambition get the better of them. Having CVTs in the game would have altered the driving a lot if you had them installed, but I guess it was just too much work. Simulating what a limited slip differential does also seemed to be too much for the PlayStation at the time. Adjusting parts would have required an entire other screen in the game, so I guess the whole feature was just cut. There's only one manual transmission in the final game, but here we see they plan to have quite a few more. Don't have much information about these 3 radios or stereos. Maybe you were able to change the music in the overworld or during races, but who's to say? Body Diet 50 is very conspicuously unused in the final game. Well, here it is. Here are some very specialized drag racing parts. It seems they were all cut together. Four-wheel steering. Perhaps too much to animate on the PS1. More adjustable parts. You should be used to seeing these by now. There's already so many unique models that they made with different aero kits. It's no wonder that these were cut. And now we have a whole bunch of Diablo parts. At some point, they wanted you to be able to customize the lights on your car, but like all this other stuff, it was cut. There's no description for the misfire system in the game, but stay tuned for a future video where we could go more in depth on some of these missing parts. Here's some unused paint. Our best guess with SSS Blue is a partnership with a Japanese tune shop that didn't make it into the game. The Yokohama GP cars use a lot of custom parts that you can't find anywhere else in the game. Here they are. These are debug parts that allow the developers to change the weather and the environment on any map for testing purposes. Finally, we have some unobtainable Wantech and Diablo parts. And that's all for this video. There's still many more things to find in the game, and in the game's beta, which we now have access to, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that in a future video. And once again, thank you so much for supporting the project.